ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। So today is our second part of the discussion on one of the 6 systems of Indian philosophy, which is very similar to the Vedanta. Last time we had begun the discussion, so just a very short recapitulation of what we had discussed last time. I will just share the images. So here you can see the 6 systems it can be in 3 pairs. Last time we had seen, which are very similar to each other. Sankhya and Yoga, top and bottom you can see they are very similar. Nyaya, Vaisheshika are very similar, and Vedanta and Purva Mimamsa are very similar. So today we are discussing Purva Mimamsa, as you know. So last time we had seen the key proponents of this philosophy. Gemini is supposed to be the founder. Founder in the sense he put this philosophy in an organized form by his aphorisms, which was commented upon by Shavara Swami, and the 2 other great exponents are Kumarila Bhatta and Prabhakara. So what is the aim of the philosophy? This is a ritualistic, it stresses on the ritualistic portion of the Vedas. So the whole aim is to help and support ritualism in 2 ways, by giving a methodology of interpretation with the help of which the Vedic injunctions can be understood, and supplying a philosophical justification of the beliefs on which ritualism depends. The main feature is dharma. It defines dharma. First, the very first aphorism of Gemini Sutra is Athato Dharma Jigyasa. Now begins our inquiry into dharma. So dharma has so many various meanings. We should remember which philosophy accepts which meaning. So this meaning of dharma is peculiar to Purva Mimamsa. We should not bring this into Vedanta or Sankhya or anything else. So according to Purva Mimamsa, what is the meaning of dharma? Dharma is a set of ritual obligations and prerogatives that, if properly performed, maintains the harmony of the world and furthers the personal well-being of the person who performs them. So it is defined as a command or injunction which compels people to action. This is dharma. It is an injunction. Do this. Don't do this. So in Sanskrit, do this means vidhi. Don't do this means nishedha. So these few terms we should know, vidhi and nishedha. So according to Purva Mimamsa, the whole of the Vedas teach only one thing. What is that? That is action. Doing something. Do rituals, do some other karma which will give you fruits afterwards. That is the whole thing. So according to them, there is no sentence in the Vedas which does not teach action. But Vedanta says, no, action is taught, but action is taught only for a higher end. Action is not the final thing. That is where they differ. So this we had seen last time. Now, today we will discuss a very subtle point of Mimamsa philosophy on which the whole philosophy is based. So just what we had seen last time, that the Mimamsakas consider the Vedas to be infallible. The words of the Vedas cannot be doubted. And we had seen last time that they consider words as well as the relation of words and their meanings to be eternal. So that is a very, very famous belief of this Purva Mimamsa philosophy. We had seen that. How do they prove this? They prove this via very simple but ingenious method. It sounds very strange to us. How can words be eternal? That we utter words, then the words dissolve. So how can words be eternal? But they say, how if somebody utters the same, 10 persons utter the same word. So we all say cow. Now, if somebody asks us, what did all these people say? We will say they uttered the same word. What was that? Cow. But if you study the wavelengths, in computer you can see that when you put an audio file, they give the wavelengths of the file. So if you see the pronunciation in that way, each pronunciation is different. Everybody is saying different things in terms of these sound waves. Then why do we say that they all pronounce the same word? How can that be possible? This can be only possible when the words are not created. We only manifest the eternal word. So this is how they proved, and we had discussed last time also. So we won't go into much detail. Now, we have seen that the Mimamsakas say that the Vedas are infallible. And to justify the authority of the Vedas, the Mimamsakas have discussed the theory of knowledge, how we know the nature and criterion of truth as well as falsity, the different sources of valid knowledge in great detail. So we have seen that there are 6 valid methods of knowledge according to Vedanta. What are those? Perception, inference, etc. Amongst them, there is one which is called Shabda Pramana, which is verbal testimony. Verbal testimony. So upon this, the Mimamsakas lay the greatest stress, because the Vedas convey knowledge in this form. So Mimamsakas say that the Vedas are the only source of dharma, and the Vedas convey knowledge in terms of verbal testimony, like somebody says something to us. So when you are saying that the Vedas are the only source, you have to prove that. And for that, you have to prove the authority of verbal testimony. That is why they lay the greatest stress on this method of knowledge, or this pramana as it is called. So I will just share the image. Just point form. See, this is verbal cognition or Shabda Pramana. How is it defined? Verbal cognition is defined as the cognition of something not present to the senses, which is produced by the knowledge of words. Like if I want to go to Toronto from here, I cannot see Toronto from here unless I have some special divine insight. So I will ask someone how to go. He will tell me. Now, he tells me through words, and I know he's a trustworthy person. So that form of knowledge which I gain from those words are called verbal testimony. So second point, you can see these words may be uttered by men who are trustworthy, or these words may belong to the Vedas. So Vedas also are trustworthy. Not only that, they are the most trustworthy according to the Mimamsakas and also Vedanta. Vedanta and Mimamsakas here agree fully. Now the former means verbal testimony of persons. They are valid when the speaker is completely trustworthy. Otherwise they are invalid. But the latter, which means the verbal testimony conveyed by the Vedas, are valid in themselves. They don't need any certificate. That some person will tell us, no, I have tried this from the Vedas, it is correct, then only you accept. No, Mimamsakas say it is not needed. Vedas are absolutely infallible. Their words cannot be contradicted. Why? Because they are of Paurusheya, means they are not created by anybody, either by men or even God. Even God has not created the Vedas. This is the stand which they take. So the infallibility of the Vedas, which is the bedrock of the Mimamsaka philosophy, it rests on the fact that Vedas are not vitiated by any defect to which the work of any imperfect person is subject to. That is the thing. Now, let us start the topic which we will discuss today. So, a very special value is attached to Vedic authority, because we have seen the commandments or dharma which we have from the Vedas is not obtained from any other source, like perception or inference or anything. While the knowledge that personal authority may impart to us can sometimes be obtained by other means of knowledge, like a person tells us something that you can go to this mountain in this way. So we can see, when we go the path, we can see or we can infer, because some other person has said the same thing, we can infer, okay, then your testimony is also correct. But what we get from the Vedas, there is no way of getting by perception or inference, etc. That is the thing. So the knowledge derived from the Vedas is neither obtainable otherwise nor dependent on any previous knowledge, because the Vedas are eternal. Now, it can be argued that the knowledge derived from verbal testimony is actually inference based on the reliability of some authority. Now we are approaching very subtle ground, so I will demand your attention. What is the thing which is said here? It is said that verbal testimony gives us knowledge, but we can also say they don't give us knowledge directly, but by inference. So Mr. X has said something, Mr. Y has said something, and I had gone to see some place, so all those tally. Suppose all those testimonies tally, then what will he say? We will draw an inference. Okay, he has said this, and it has been verified by another person. So that is true. Now it can be said that, okay, then your knowledge of the Vedas also may be reduced to inference only. That yes, some other person has said it, it can be verified. That is why the Vedas are true. Now this is against the Mimamsa belief. So in order to reply to those who reduce this knowledge from the Vedas to inference on the ground that validity of such knowledge is ascertained by inference based on the reliability of authority. So here if someone says, Vedas tell you this, and Jesus also says this, Buddha also says this. So therefore, I will accept the Vedas. Here what we are telling? We are telling that we are inferring that the Vedas are correct because Jesus has said, Buddha has said, Ramakrishna has said that thing. That is not what is true according to the Mimamsakas. So that we may not reduce this Vedic authority to knowledge gained by inference, Mimamsakas assert that the validity of every knowledge is assured by the conditions which generate that knowledge. So each sentence now we have to pay attention because this is a very, very subtle thing. How do we know knowledge? That means, what is the proof that a knowledge is valid? What is the proof? If I know something, if I see some book, now how do I know that this knowledge is valid? So Mimamsakas, like the Vedantis, they say that the validity of knowledge is assured by the conditions which generate that knowledge. What are the conditions which generate this knowledge? When I see a book, the conditions are my eyesight should be okay, there should be proper light in the room, the book should be clearly visible within the range of vision. So all these conditions which generate the knowledge, they conditions themselves, they validate that knowledge also. So that the knowledge imparted by any authority, like the Vedas, they carry with themselves such assurance of their own truth. They need not be proved by some other thing. This the Mimamsakas have to prove in order to prove that the Vedas are infallible. So this is the bedrock of their philosophy. This is called the doctrine of self-validity of knowledge, and is the answer to the question how knowledge is known. Knowledge is self-valid. This is called Swatah Pramanya. Pramana means proof. What is the proof of knowledge? Swatah. Swatah means it proves itself. This is the cornerstone on which the whole structure of Mimamsa philosophy is based. So we have to understand it very, very clearly. Validity. Validity means what? Validity means the certitude of truth. So Mimamsa philosophy asserts that all knowledge, excepting the action of remembering, when we remember something, except that knowledge, all knowledge is valid in itself. for it certifies its own truth and neither depends on any other external condition nor on any other knowledge for its validity. So this theory is very complex. When we go deeper, we will see. Now, first of all, what is knowledge? If somebody asks us, what is knowledge? Every moment we are knowing something. But if we are asked to define, we cannot define. So what is knowledge? We have to start from this definition. Knowledge is the apprehension of an object which has not already been apprehended. If I see this book first time, that is knowledge. If I see it second time, that is not knowledge, because I have already gained the knowledge of that book. First thing, that thing should be such that it has not been already apprehended. Second thing, what is the characteristic of knowledge? It should truly represent the real nature of the object. If from a distance I see a donkey as a horse or the horse as donkey, that is not knowledge, because it does not correspond to the real object. So these two conditions must be satisfied. That knowledge should apprehend something which has not been apprehended before, and second thing, it should coincide with the real nature of the object. Now, memory, why is it excluded from knowledge? In the definition we had seen that memory is not considered knowledge. Why? Because memory is apprehension of an object which has already been seen. Otherwise, how can we remember it? So, it does not yield new knowledge. So, therefore, memory is excluded from valid knowledge, which is characterized by novelty. Another characteristic of valid knowledge is what? It is free from contradiction. If I see something lying on the road, I think it is a snake. But when I go near, I see it as a rope. So what has happened? My earlier knowledge has been contradicted by a later knowledge. So this means that my knowledge was not correct knowledge. So non-contradiction or coherence is a test of truth, as we all know. So contradiction implies there is no coherence, there is no consistency. Valid knowledge truly represents the real nature of its object. It reveals its object in its true nature. So it must be generated by causes which are not tainted by any defect. If I have color blindness or something, then what will happen? I will see some color as some other color. That cannot be valid knowledge, because the condition which is generating the knowledge, that itself is defective. So these two things you have to remember: novelty, non-contradiction, and correspondence with reality are the characteristics of valid knowledge. See how deep they have gone. We can never think along those lines. These three, if they are not present, all these three, if there is no novelty, means we have already seen something. If the knowledge is contradicted by some other thing, and it does not correspond with reality, then it cannot be called knowledge at all. Okay, this much is clear. Now the validity of knowledge. So what does the Purva Mimamsa say about this? They say that whenever there are sufficient conditions for the generation of a particular kind of knowledge, and therefore those conditions are perfect, and therefore there is no ground for disbelief or doubt, there arises at once the kind of knowledge which contains an element of belief in the object known. So if everything is perfect in this room, light is okay, all the conditions are good, my eyes are okay, and if someone brings me a object which I have not seen before, new thing, then there arises at once in my mind that kind of knowledge that about that object which is true and in which I also believe. These two are different minded. Slowly we will see the detail. The knowledge is true, that is one thing. First, second thing is I also believe in that knowledge. The two things are not the same. So for example, when our normal eyes light on any object conveniently situated in broad daylight, all the conditions are satisfied, there is visual perception, or we hear someone speak a meaningful sentence, we have knowledge from his words. So when there are sufficient premises, then we know that the knowledge is correct. And what happens? Then we act upon that knowledge. When the knowledge is gained, we act upon that knowledge. I ask someone, where is Shoppers Drug Mart, nearest one? They say, oh, go here, Kingsgate Mall, Shoppers Drug Mart is the nearest. I know he's a trustworthy person, knowledge is generated in me, I go. We act upon that knowledge. So we cannot act upon that unless we believe in that. So by his words, belief is also generated. The very fact that we act on such knowledge in everyday life, as soon as we get it, without any attempt to test its validity by argument, shows that we believe in it as soon as it arises. This shows, no, a trustworthy person tells us something. Immediately we don't wait. Okay, let us go. This means what? Immediately that belief also arises in us. And the fact that such knowledge leads to successful activity and not to any contradiction shows further that such knowledge is valid. So I go to Shoppers Drug Mart, purchase whatever I want, I come. This shows what? That yes, the knowledge was correct. But when the conditions required for knowledge are defective, then of course that knowledge will not be proper knowledge. That is a different thing. So from these facts, two conclusions are drawn by the Mimamsakas. What are the conclusions? Again I repeat. First, the validity of knowledge arises from the very conditions that give rise to that knowledge and not from any extra condition. This is the first thing. And the validity of knowledge is also believed in as soon as the knowledge arises. Belief does not await the verification of the knowledge by some other knowledge, like inference. This the Mimamsakas have to prove, because otherwise the objection will be that what you hear from the Vedas will also have to be verified. But no, it is not true according to the Mimamsakas. So that valid knowledge is also believed in as soon as the knowledge arises. This view in its double aspect is known as the theory of self-validity of knowledge or the theory of intrinsic validity of knowledge, or in Sanskrit, Swatah Pramanyavad. Swatah means of itself. Knowledge proves itself. Now it sounds quite clear. There is no difficulty. Wait. The time for Tylenol is coming now. We cannot understand this unless we examine the arguments against this view. Now, the chief philosophy, the most important philosophy which does not agree with this view is the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy. Now, what does Nyaya say? So, as I have told you, the great attraction towards these is when any particular philosophy proves its viewpoint, we will say, how can this be wrong? This is true without any doubt. They give such logic and they prove it with such ingenuity. So now let us go to the Nyaya viewpoint, otherwise we cannot understand this. So what does Nyaya say? Nyaya say to Mimamsakas, you are talking nonsense. It is true that under certain conditions, knowledge is produced. But how can you say that knowledge is a proof of its own truth, that we don't have to verify knowledge? What nonsense is this? They will say, when we perceive anything as blue, I see something, a blue gown or something I see. It is a result of visual contact. My eyes are in connection with some object. Okay? Visual contacts produce this knowledge. And this visual contact, how can it certify the knowledge which is produced in my brain is true? How can that visual contact give a certificate that the knowledge produced in my mind is true? Because the visual contact is not in any touch with the knowledge it has conditioned. How can it govern that knowledge? Moreover, knowledge is a mental affair. It is all happening in the mind. How can it certify the objective truth of its representation? How can it certify its own validity? In other words, how can my perception that this is a blue thing guarantee that what is perceived as blue subjectively in my mind is also blue actually? How can it, there is no connection between that. How can it prove like that? Knowledge is happening in my brain, but the blue color is outside. So how can what is happening here inside prove what is outside? There is no connection between them. After my perception of anything as blue, we do not have any such perception that what I have perceived as blue is really blue. After I perceive something as blue, is there some perception that yes, what I have perceived as blue is really blue? There is no such perception. So, this so-called self-validity of knowledge cannot be testified or justified by any perception. Then how do we know that what we are seeing as blue is blue? They say, Nyaya says that we can only be certain that knowledge has been produced by an act of perception. There is nothing in this knowledge or its revelation of its object from which we can infer that the perception is also objectively valid. How can my perception of a blue thing also tell me that objectively this thing is blue? It is not possible. This is one thing. Then Nyaya says, if suppose what you say is true, if the production of our knowledge certifies its validity, then there would be no invalid knowledge at all. No illusory knowledge. Then my seeing a snake, a rope as a snake. I see a rope, I think it is a snake. So Nyaya says, if by just seeing it would have proved that this knowledge is true, then how can you justify that wrong knowledge at all? Then there will be no need to prove anything that your knowledge is true or wrong. So, following our perception of a mirage, we would never come to grief. We see water in the desert where there is no water. But according to you, if we see water, there is water. So that is proved to be false. So that we are disappointed often in our perceptions proves that when we practically follow the directions of perception, we are undecided to its validity. But it can be ascertained only by the correspondence of the perception with what we find later in practical experience. This you have to understand. What does Nyaya say? First of all, we have seen that Nyaya says that this is objective, your knowledge is subjective. How can your subjective knowledge certify that what is objective is true? This is one thing. So then Mimamsakas ask Nyayikas, okay, then according to you, what is the validity of knowledge? So what do Nyayikas say? They say that when suppose someone say, I ask for drinking water. Someone says, in that glass there is water. I go, I drink the water. Then my practical experience certifies my knowledge. As simple as that. How do I know that the glass contains water? When I go, I drink and I satisfy my thirst. Is it not? That's common sense. And how can you contradict that? So they say that when our practical needs are fulfilled by that knowledge, then only we know that the knowledge is true. If someone gives me a book, I take the book, open it, see, print it, I know this is a book. Then I become sure this is a book. This is how knowledge is validated. So according to Nyayikas, the validity of truth of knowledge is the attainment by practical experience of the object and fulfillment of our purpose from that. Somebody says this is a comfortable shoe. I put my feet in that, I walk around, practically I ascertain, then that knowledge is certified. Now this is uncontradictable, is it not? No. Mimamsakas proved that this is not true. This is the interesting part. So this we have to remember, the two objections. First, the Nyayikas say validity of knowledge is proved only by the external object. What I see as blue is proved to be blue only by that thing which is blue, not by something going in my head. Second thing, the knowledge of fruitful activity generated proves knowledge. When I go and drink that water, it is fruitful activity, no? I satisfy my thirst. So then only I become certain that that glass contained water and not anything else. So these two are the contentions of Nayayikas. What? They say that validity of knowledge is not self-valid. Validity of knowledge is proved by two things. First, the external thing itself. Second, when we do some activity and it is successful regarding that object, then I know that knowledge is true. This sounds so logical. How can it be contradictory? Every day we act in that way. Now, very subtle point. This is a very subtle point. How do the Mimamsakas answer the first objection? First objection is what? Knowledge is proved by external object only. The blue object proves that what I see is as blue is blue. How do they answer this? These Mimamsakas say to the Nayayikas, you are talking like a child. You say that blue thing proves my knowledge that it is actually blue. That is what you are saying. Nobody has ever experienced that any knowledge is a product of any external thing. You say that blue object proves that what I see as blue is blue. But this is not true. Because knowledge, we will see how it goes, then it will be clear. We say that knowledge cannot be produced by any external thing. When we have a perception and immediately we become aware of certain objective things, is it not? When I perceive, immediately I become aware of something. So what does it mean? It means that knowledge reveals to us the fact of the objective world. How is the objective world being proven? Tell me, how do we prove that there is an objective world? By our knowledge of it. Is it not? So this whole objective world which you are telling will prove by my knowledge is actually proved only by my knowledge. So what you are saying that the objective world is generating knowledge is only your peculiar hypothesis which cannot be demonstrated by experience. Why? It is the supreme prerogative of knowledge that knowledge reveals all other things. When we say that knowledge has been produced in us by external thing, then we are putting the cart before the horse. Knowledge only photographs the objective phenomena for us. Knowledge makes us aware of all these things which are here. But there is nothing to show that knowledge has been generated by those things. Is it not? How can you contradict this? Knowledge is proving the existence of the outer world. How can you say that outer world, objective world, is producing knowledge in us? If we did not know this world, then it would not exist for us at all. So, knowledge only reveals to us an objective phenomena. But knowledge is not generated by those phenomena. Knowledge is not like other things because it stands above everything else. It illumines all other things. And second thing, what you said, what we call agreement with facts by practical experience. The agreement of what we say that agreement of facts by practical experience is only agreement of previous knowledge with later knowledge. We will see this in detail. It is very interesting. So there arise indeed different kinds of knowledge revealing different things. But this does not mean that those things are generating knowledge. Because actually knowledge is revealing those things. You say that that blue thing is generating my knowledge of blue. But if I did not know that, it would not exist for me at all. So it is my knowledge which is revealing that, not the other way around. How knowledge reveals all this, we don't know. We only know that it does so. So the rise of knowledge is never perceived by us to be dependent on any objective fact, because all objective facts are dependent on knowledge for their revelation or illumination. So the first point is kicked out of the window. You say that the objective thing is produced knowledge. It is silly, because my knowledge is only revealing that thing. So how can it prove knowledge? Its existence depends on my knowledge. This is the second thing. Now let us go to the second objection. What did they say? Nayayikas say knowledge is proved when, according to that knowledge, we act and our action is successful. When someone says that it's a book, we read it, see the printed pages, we gain knowledge, we know it's a book. It's okay, no problem. This also is not a correct argument according to the Mimamsakas. How do they prove it? It is simply unbelievable. This subtle point which we forget when we say this thing. Now please, I just want your attention. So what does Nayayika say? That when there is agreement of knowledge with the fruitful activity, then knowledge is proved. Validity of the first knowledge of an object is proved when our activities regarding it proved to be fruitful. Now, how do the Mimamsakas prove that this is not true? How do they, what answer do they give? They say that you say that the knowledge that there is water in the glass is proved when you go and drink water from the glass and your thirst is satisfied. Now, this second knowledge, when you are drinking water from the glass, your thirst is satisfied. How do you know? Is it not knowledge? Your knowledge that your thirst is satisfied. Now please pay attention. You say that when our thirst is satisfied, is it not a knowledge? It's a knowledge. It's not simply an act. A simple act without knowledge would not have been any use to us. So Mimamsakas tell Nayayikas, you fellows, you don't have the brains to realize that when you drink water and satisfy your thirst, you are actually knowing that my thirst has been satisfied. Is it not? And you say that this knowing validates your first knowledge that there is water in the glass. I will again repeat. The Nayayikas say that you know that there is water in the glass. It cannot be self-valid knowledge till you go and drink that water and your thirst is satisfied. Mimamsakas say, okay, you say that my knowledge of the water in the glass is validated by my drinking the water. You forget that when you drink water and satisfy your thirst, that is also knowledge. Now you say that the second knowledge validates my first knowledge. I ask you, what validates my second knowledge? Have you got it? If they say that my drinking water and satisfying my thirst, that knowledge validates my first knowledge that there is water in the glass. I ask you, this knowledge that I have drunk the water and satisfied my thirst, what validates that knowledge? How do you know that? I am drinking water, my thirst is satisfied. How do you know this? How do you know? Then Nayayikas are forced to say, how do I know means? I just know. Knowledge proves itself. Knowledge proves itself. Mimamsakas say that's what they are telling. Isn't it brilliant? Absolutely brilliant. So, Mimamsakas say, if the validity of the second knowledge, that I have drunk water and I have satisfied my thirst, if you say that that knowledge is self-valid, then why cannot you say that when I was told that there is water in the glass, why is not that knowledge self-valid? And if you say that, okay, my drinking water and satisfying my thirst will also be validated by another knowledge, then how will that knowledge be validated? So if you go into this, that one knowledge will validate the another, first knowledge will be validated by second knowledge, you say, then how will the second knowledge be validated? So this will put you into an endless circle you cannot get out of. So this proves that the validity, this knowledge is self-valid. If the validity of the first knowledge would be determined by the knowledge of fruitful activity, and the validity of the knowledge of fruitful activity would be determined by the first knowledge, if you say, another point which can be raised, the Nayayikas will say that my validity of the first knowledge is, my first knowledge is validated by second knowledge, my second knowledge is validated by the first knowledge. Then we are just moving around in a circle, we don't prove anything. That cannot be. That is a false argumentation. So in any way you examine it, it is proved that knowledge has to be self-valid. This theory is called the self-validity or theory of self-validity or Swata Pramanya of knowledge as soon as it is produced. So the sum and substance is, whenever there is any knowledge, it carries with it that impression that it is certain and valid, and we are naturally prompted to work according to its direction. There is no indecision in our minds at the time the knowledge rises. Another objection they had made, that if knowledge is self-valid, then there will never be any illusory knowledge. If I see a snake as a rope, if as soon as I see it, the first knowledge arises that it is a snake, but actually it is a rope. So how can you say that the knowledge is self-valid? There is a very simple answer to this. Mimamsa says that this knowledge, which is contradicted by another knowledge, is not knowledge at all. We don't even count this as knowledge. So here please remember two things which will aid us in our future study. In English, there is only one word, knowledge. But in Sanskrit, there are two words. There is a different word for valid knowledge. What is that? Prama. Prama karanam pramanam. Prama is valid knowledge. And karanam means the instrument of valid knowledge is pramanam. And jnana, the term jnana in philosophical parlance, is also used for invalid knowledge. We can say mithya jnana, but we can never say mithya prama, because prama means valid knowledge. So please remember this. So in answer to this question about objection about illusory knowledge, Mimamsakas have a very simple answer, that illusory knowledge is not prama at all. So it does not even consider any, it does not even recognize any consideration. So invalidity of knowledge the proof of invalidity of knowledge may come from outside, that is correct, but when knowledge is valid, it is its own proof. That is the thing. So this is what the Mimamsakas mean when they say that the validity of knowledge appears immediately with its rise. But the invalidity may be derived later from some other experience. So the point here is two things. We have to all these discussion which we have made. So first of all, knowledge cannot be derived from external things. This is the first thing, because the knowledge, it is knowledge which reveals all other things to us. And secondly, it is not that only our successful endeavor can prove any knowledge. Only fruitful activity can prove that knowledge. No. Because then we would need another knowledge to prove that the knowledge of the fruitful activity is true. So in this way, these two main objections according to this theory are met with. Actually, this is not all there is to it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but we won't go into that, don't worry. Yeah. There are 9 objections raised, actually. If you study the book, there is a book called in Sanskrit it is called Tattva Prakashika, that is called Chitsukhi. That is a very, very advanced text of philosophy, Advaita philosophy. Unfortunately, there is no translation and it is very difficult Sanskrit, so it is practically impossible to understand. But I was just glancing through that. So first they take the opponent's view that knowledge is not self-valid. They put 9 or 10 objections. Then each of them is answered. So in this way, these philosophical arguments and counter arguments go on. So what is the conclusion then? Conclusion is if knowledge is not intrinsically valid, it cannot be validated by any other knowledge. Because then the second knowledge will have to be validated, no? So validity of knowledge cannot be due to extraneous conditions, and knowledge cannot be validated by some other knowledge also. So now the Mimamsakas say, now you are convinced? Okay. Now hear what we have to say. Belief in authority, personal or impersonal, Vedic or non-Vedic, arises in a similar way. On hearing a meaningful sentence, we at once believe that what it says is true, unless there are reasons for doubt. That is different. Therefore, authority of the eternal impersonal Vedas also stands on its own legs. It does not have to be proved by something else. The validity of the Vedas is self-evident and not dependent on any inference or anything. Arguments are necessary only for the negative work of clearing the mind of doubts and all. But when the doubts are cleared, the Vedas themselves reveal their own meaning, and belief accompanies that revelation. That is the thing. Vedas reveal that, and also belief also follows that. To secure this belief, all that the Mimamsa does is to refute the possible grounds on which the infallibility of the Vedas may be doubted. When that is done, nothing more is to be done. The Vedas reveal themselves, so that when all the doubts are cleared, the mind is prepared for the immediate acceptance of what is known from the Vedas. So once this is proved, there is nothing more to be done. Now they say just go and follow the Vedic commandments. That is all. So answer to the question, how is knowledge known? Answer is, knowledge knows itself. Knowledge is self-valid, self-revealing. Knowledge is its own proof. Swatah pramanya vada. Theory of intrinsic validity. This is the Swatah pramanya vada of the Mimamsakas, and Advaita also believes in that. Most of the schools believe in that, except the Nyaya Vaisheshika system. So I hope I've given you a headache for 1 month, then I can take holiday for 1 month.
This is enough to digest.
Yeah, so this was really interesting, but I had to consult a lot of books anyway. That's a different thing. Because many people have told this in so many ways, but how to present this so that it can be grasped? Because if you reach the original text, it becomes very, very confusing. And I consulted the greatest of the writers of Indian philosophy. First is Surendranath Dasgupta, must have heard. Second is Jadunath Sinha. And of course, Chatterjee and Datta, they have written the Introduction to Indian Philosophy. A very interesting study. So let us stop here. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna